The crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow across the grand ballroom, their light dancing off the polished marble floors like scattered diamonds. Sarah Mitchell adjusted the silk fabric of her emerald dress, smoothing it carefully over her lap as she positioned her wheelchair at a table near the back of the reception hall. The elegant venue buzzed with laughter and conversation, but she felt oddly separate from it all, like watching a movie from the outside. She had arrived alone to her business partner's wedding, as she did to most social events these days. Being the CEO of a successful tech company meant her calendar was always full of board meetings and conference calls, but it also meant her personal life had slowly faded into the background. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight, she had promised herself she would try to connect with people beyond quarterly reports and profit margins. The bride, Rebecca, had been Sarah's college roommate before becoming her business partner. They had built their software company from a tiny apartment, surviving on instant noodles and dreams. Now, watching Rebecca dance with her new husband, Sarah felt a bittersweet mix of pride and loneliness. Her friend looked radiant in her flowing white gown, spinning gracefully as the music swirled around them. Sarah sipped her champagne slowly, watching the other guests move between tables, greeting friends and sharing stories. A few colleagues had stopped by earlier to chat about work, but those conversations felt hollow tonight. She found herself studying the families scattered throughout the room, parents chasing toddlers, couples holding hands, grandparents sharing quiet moments together. The warmth of human connection seemed to flow easily around her, yet somehow never quite reached where she sat. The accident 3 years ago had changed everything. One rainy evening, a distracted driver had run a red light, and Sarah's world had shifted forever. The physical therapy had been grueling, but learning to navigate social situations in her wheelchair had proven even more challenging. People often seemed unsure how to interact with her now, their eyes either avoiding her completely or filled with an uncomfortable pity that made her want to disappear. She had thrown herself into work after the accident, finding comfort in spreadsheets and strategic planning. Her company had flourished under her focused leadership, but her personal relationships had gradually withered. Dating had become a minefield of awkward explanations and well-meaning but hurtful assumptions. Eventually, she had stopped trying altogether, convincing herself that independence was better than vulnerability. The band began playing a slower song, and couples drifted onto the dance floor. Sarah watched them sway together, remembering how much she used to love dancing. Her physical therapist had assured her that wheelchair dancing was not only possible but beautiful, yet she had never found the courage to try it in public. The fear of being stared at or, worse, pitied, kept her firmly planted at her table during every wedding or social gathering. A small movement caught her attention at the table next to hers. A little girl with curly blonde hair and a purple dress was standing beside her chair, looking lost among the sea of adult legs. She couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 years old, and her lower lip was trembling slightly as she looked around the crowded room. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Sarah asked gently, rolling her chair a bit closer. The little girl turned toward her with wide blue eyes. "I can't find my daddy," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the music. Sarah's heart immediately went out to the child. "What's your name, honey?" "Emma," the girl replied, taking a small step closer to Sarah's chair. "My daddy is tall and has brown hair. He was talking to some people, but now I don't see him." Sarah looked around the ballroom, scanning for a worried-looking man who might be searching for his daughter. "Don't worry, Emma, we'll find him together. Can you tell me what color shirt he's wearing?" "Blue," Emma said, pointing toward the bar area. "Like the sky. Perfect. Let's look over there," Sarah suggested, beginning to wheel toward the area Emma had indicated. The little girl walked alongside her chair, her small hand occasionally reaching out to touch the armrest as if finding comfort in the connection. As they moved through the crowd, Sarah noticed how people automatically stepped aside to make room for her wheelchair, but their expressions were different when they saw Emma walking beside her. Instead of the usual awkward glances, she saw warm smiles directed toward the child, and by extension, toward her as well. It was a subtle shift, but it made Sarah feel more included in the celebration around them. "There he is," Emma suddenly exclaimed, pointing toward a man standing near the bar. He was indeed tall with brown hair, wearing a light blue dress shirt, and his face showed clear signs of worry as he scanned the crowd. "Daddy," Emma called out, waving her small hand above her head. The man's face immediately transformed with relief when he spotted his daughter. He hurried over to them, his long strides quickly closing the distance between them. "Emma, there you are. I was so worried," he said, kneeling down to gather his daughter into his arms. After a moment, He looked up at Sarah with grateful eyes. Thank you so much for helping her. I'm David Parker. Sarah Mitchell, she replied, extending her hand. And it was no trouble at all. Emma is a lovely little girl. David stood up, still holding Emma's hand, and Sarah found herself looking up into warm brown eyes that held no trace of the discomfort or pity she had grown accustomed to seeing. Instead, there was genuine gratitude and something else she couldn't quite identify. I feel terrible, David continued. I was talking to Rebecca's cousin about work, and when I turned around, Emma had wandered off. In a place this crowded, anything could have happened. But nothing did, Sarah said reassuringly. Emma was very brave. She knew to ask for help when she needed it. Emma beamed at the praise, then looked up at her father. Daddy, Sarah has a special chair with wheels. It's really cool. David smiled at his daughter's innocent observation, then looked back at Sarah. Emma has always been fascinated by anything with wheels. Cars, bikes, roller skates, she loves them all. Can I try sitting in it? Emma asked Sarah with the direct honesty that only children possess. Sarah laughed, the sound surprising her with its genuineness. Well, it's a little big for you, but you can touch it if you'd like. She watched as Emma carefully examined the wheels and the various parts of her chair, asking questions with the natural curiosity of a child who saw something interesting rather than something tragic. Emma, don't bother Sarah, David said gently, though his tone held amusement rather than reproach. She's not bothering me at all, Sarah assured him. It's refreshing to meet someone who's genuinely curious rather than. She paused, not wanting to finish that thought aloud. David seemed to understand anyway. People can be strange about things they don't understand, he said quietly. Emma hasn't learned to be uncomfortable about differences yet. I hope she never does. Their conversation was interrupted by the band announcing the next dance, a classic slow song that drew more couples onto the floor. Sarah watched them go, feeling the familiar pang of exclusion she always experienced during these moments. Do you like to dance? David asked suddenly. The question caught Sarah off guard. I used to, she admitted. Before, she gestured vaguely toward her legs. But you still could, couldn't you? He continued, his tone casual but interested. I mean, if you wanted to. Sarah felt her cheeks warm slightly. Theoretically, yes, but I've never actually tried it. Not in public, anyway. David was quiet for a moment, watching the couples on the dance floor. Emma had become distracted by the twinkling lights on a nearby table and was quietly counting them to herself. Would you like to try? David asked softly. With me, I mean. If you're comfortable with it. Sarah's heart began to race. The invitation was so unexpected, so genuine, that she found herself speechless for a moment. I don't know if I remember how, she finally managed. I don't think dancing is something you forget, David said with a gentle smile. Besides, I'm not exactly Fred Astaire myself. We could figure it out together. Sarah looked out at the dance floor, then back at David's encouraging face. Something in his expression told her that this wasn't an offer born of pity or obligation. He genuinely wanted to dance with her, and that realization sent a flutter of excitement through her chest. What about Emma? She asked, glancing at the little girl who was now trying to count the crystals on the chandelier above them. Emma loves music, David replied. She'll probably want to join us. If that's okay with you, of course. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling as though she was standing at the edge of a cliff, preparing to jump. Okay, she said quietly. Yes, I'd like to try. David's face lit up with a smile that made Sarah's stomach do a small flip. He offered her his hand, and she took it, feeling the warmth and strength of his fingers as he gently led her toward the dance floor. Emma noticed them moving and immediately abandoned her crystal counting to follow along. When they reached an open space among the other couples, Sarah suddenly felt exposed and uncertain. The music was soft and romantic, and she could sense people beginning to notice them. Her instinct was to retreat, to return to the safety of her table, but David's steady presence beside her kept her anchored. Just follow my lead, he said softly, positioning himself in front of her chair. And don't worry about anyone else. It's just us. He took her hands in his, and Sarah felt a jolt of connection that had nothing to do with dancing. As the music played, David began to move slowly, guiding her chair in gentle turns and glides across the floor. It wasn't traditional ballroom dancing, but it was dancing nonetheless, and Sarah felt a joy she hadn't experienced in years bloom in her chest. Emma giggled and began spinning around them, her purple dress twirling out like a flower. Other dancers smiled as they passed, and Sarah realized that instead of staring with curiosity or pity, people were simply enjoying the sight of three people having fun together. "See," David murmured as he guided her through another gentle turn. "You definitely didn't forget." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were happy tears. For the first time since her accident, she felt beautiful and graceful and completely herself. The wheelchair wasn't a limitation in this moment, it was simply part of the dance. The song continued, and Sarah found herself relaxing into the rhythm, trusting David's lead and allowing herself to enjoy the sensation of movement and music. She caught glimpses of Rebecca on the other side of the dance floor, and her friend's face was radiant with happiness, not just for her own wedding, but clearly for seeing Sarah engaged and joyful. When the music finally ended, Sarah felt breathless and exhilarated. The other dancers around them were applauding, and she realized with surprise that some of the applause was directed toward them. Instead of feeling self-conscious, she felt proud. "That was amazing," she said to David, her voice filled with genuine wonder. "You were amazing," he replied, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush. Emma ran up to them, her face flushed with excitement. "That was so fun. Can we dance again?" "Maybe later, sweetheart," David said, ruffling his daughter's curls. "I think we should let Sarah rest for a bit." They made their way back to the tables, but instead of returning to her original seat in the back, Sarah found herself joining David and Emma at their table closer to the center of the room. The conversation flowed easily as they shared stories over dinner. David told her about his work as a pediatric nurse, explaining how he had become a single father when Emma's mother decided she wasn't ready for the responsibilities of parenthood. "It's been just the two of us for 3 years now," he said, watching Emma color on her placemat with crayons provided by the venue. "She's the best thing that ever happened to me." Sarah shared her own story more openly than she had with anyone in years. She told them about building her company, about the accident, about the challenges of rebuilding her life. David listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions and offering understanding rather than sympathy. As the evening progressed, Sarah found herself laughing more than she had in months. Emma had taken to her immediately, showing her the pictures she had drawn and asking to hear stories about running a company. David proved to be intelligent and funny, with a dry sense of humor that perfectly complemented Sarah's own wit. When the band announced the last dance of the evening, David once again extended his hand to Sarah. This time, she didn't hesitate. They moved onto the dance floor together, Emma dancing around them once more, and Sarah felt as though she was exactly where she belonged. As the final notes of the song faded away, David leaned down close to her ear. "Sarah, I know this might be forward, but would you like to have dinner with us sometime? Somewhere we can actually hear each other talk." Sarah's heart soared. "I would love that," she replied without hesitation. Emma, who had been listening with the acute hearing that all children possess, clapped her hands together. "Yay, Sarah can come see my room and my dollhouse." Later, as the reception wound down and guests began to say their goodbyes, Sarah found herself reluctant to leave. The evening had transformed from one of loneliness into something magical and unexpected. She exchanged phone numbers with David, promising to call him soon to arrange their dinner. Rebecca approached as Sarah was preparing to leave, her wedding dress bustling around her as she walked. "Sarah, I'm so glad you came tonight," Rebecca said, giving her a warm hug. "And I'm even more glad you met David. You two looked wonderful out there on the dance floor. Did you arrange this somehow?" Sarah asked suspiciously, though she was smiling. Rebecca laughed. "I wish I could take credit, but no. Sometimes the best things just happen when you're open to them." As Sarah made her way to the parking lot, David and Emma walking alongside her, she reflected on the truth of Rebecca's words. She had spent 3 years building walls around herself, convinced that independence was safer than vulnerability. Tonight, she had been reminded that the most beautiful moments in life often came from taking risks and opening your heart to unexpected possibilities. David helped her into her specially equipped car while Emma chatted excitedly about their upcoming dinner plans. As Sarah drove home through the quiet streets, she felt lighter than she had in years. The loneliness that had been her constant companion was gone, replaced by anticipation and hope. She had arrived at the wedding alone, resigned to another evening of watching life happen around her. She was leaving with new friends, potential romance, and most importantly, a renewed sense of herself as someone worthy of love and connection. The crystal chandeliers had cast their warm light on more than just a wedding celebration that night. They had illuminated the beginning of something beautiful and new, proving that sometimes the most wonderful adventures begin with the simple words, "Will you be my date?" Sarah smiled as she pulled into her driveway, already looking forward to tomorrow and all the possibilities it held. The dance floor had taught her more than just how to move again, it had reminded her how to live.